What's up everyone, welcome to this video. So today we're going to look at one-to-many relationships in SQLAlchemy. So today we're going to look at how we can configure a one-to-many relationship between two tables. So think of a one-to-many relationship as one that has one record in one table being related to many other records in other tables. For example, you may have one parent having many children. So that means that many children can be born or can be associated to one parent, and that's what we're going to exactly look at. However, the example we're going to be using is more of a real world concept. So we may think of like a program and many courses that may be offered within that program. So I want you to imagine a university in which multiple programs are offered, but within these programs we have many courses being offered. That is the example that we're going to be using in this video. So the first thing we're going to do is to set up a simple project. Right here in VS Code, I have an empty folder already open. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and open up a terminal. And I'm going to do that by pressing Ctrl and caret or that specific backtick. So once I've opened that, what I'm going to do is to create a new virtual environment. So I'm going to create this with Python -m, which is basically going to run this as a command. It's going to call the venv module as a command. And then I'll create my virtual environment as env. Now that our virtual environment has been created, let's go ahead and activate it with source env. So I'm on Windows, you can use scripts and then activate. However, if you're on Linux or Mac OS, then you will have to use something like env/bin/activate. So once I've been able to do that, I'm going to install SQLAlchemy. So I'm going to say pip install, and then I say SQLAlchemy. So once SQLAlchemy has been installed, the next thing is going to be for us to set up a simple database connection. But before you do that, I'm going to first of all create a requirements.txt file that's going to be responsible for basically keeping our requirements. So I'll say, and that will create a simple requirements.txt, which will basically show the different packages or modules we've been able to install. So once I've been able to do that, then let's create a new file. We are going to create our file and call it connect.py. In here, what we're going to do is to first of all set up an engine object, which is going to be responsible for helping us to establish a connection to our database. So to do that, we're going to begin by saying from SQLAlchemy, we are going to go ahead and import. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and import our create engine function. So this is going to be the create engine function, and a call to this function is going to help us to create our engine. Now what this engine is going to be is simply an object that we shall use to point to our database. This is the main configuration place or the main source of our configurations to our database. So in here is where we go ahead and provide our database URL or a location for which our database is going to be. Now for this example, I'm going to be using SQLite, which is simply a file-based database that's going to make it easier for us. The beauty about this is we can be able to use it with Python without having to import or install third-party libraries. So I'll set up a URL in this way. I'll say we're going to set this up as SQLite, and what we shall have is where we are going to have our database. So I'll say site.db. So what this does is to basically describe that our SQLite database is going to be, our database is going to be an SQLite database, but it can be PostgreSQL, MySQL, and so on. And what this /site.db means is that our database is going to be found within the same folder that we have our project, just like you see right here. So this is just one way in which we can define our database URL with our SQLite database. So once we've been able to do that, I'm going to add one specific other argument, which is going to be the echo argument. And this is a boolean that's going to help us to log the SQLAlchemy that will be used or carried out every time we carry out a transaction within our database. So once I've been able to do that, I'm going to go ahead and then move on to creating our database models. So once we've been able to set up our connection to our simple database, let's go ahead and try to use our connection to basically test our working of our simple connection. So what we're going to do is to make use of our engine object. So I'll just come right here and say with. So this is basically going to create a context in which our engine object is going to be creating a connection object. So what we can do is to call the connect method on this engine object, and what this will do is to help us to access our connection object. So once we have access to this connection object, we can basically go ahead and execute some sample SQL by saying con.execute. Now in here we can go ahead and provide our simple SQL statement. So for us to write text SQL statements, we shall have to import one more other function that's going to be our text function. So this text function is going to allow us to basically go ahead and write SQL text statements. So in here what we're going to do is to come right here and say select, and we're basically going to log or run a select statement of the word hello. And once we've been able to do this, then we are now going to basically run our code. And what this will do is to go ahead and basically print this specific query. So what you can do is to basically go ahead and set this to be our result. So we can say that this is going to be our result, and then we shall basically go ahead and print. So what we've done here is to simply go ahead and describe a connection object by basically calling our engine.connect method right here. So once we've accessed our connection object, then we're going to go ahead and create a result object that's simply going to be the result of executing this text of hello, or basically making this select statement of hello. And after that, we are now going to go ahead and print our result by calling another method called the .all method. So once we've been able to do that, I'm going to open up my terminal right here, and what I'll do is to say python connect.py, and what this is going to do is going to basically print a list of all the results that will be after executing this simple SQL query. So once we've been able to do that, the next thing is going to be for us to create our database models for our one-to-many relationship. Now that we've been able to test our database connection, we shall notice that our simple database has been created right here in our folder, which is amazing. However, we do not have any database tables in here yet. So for us to be able to create some database tables, we shall need to create database model classes, which are going to help us to basically map onto real databases. These models will define the tables as well as to define the relationships that are going to be within those two tables. You can have as many tables, having as many relationships as you want, but in this example we're going to look into a simple one-to-many relationship. So what I'm going to do is to create a new file, and I'm going to call this models.py. So the models.py, I'm going to begin by first of all drawing a picture of what we want to define as our two entities or tables. So the first one is going to be our table of, let's say, our programs. So this is a program, can be computer science, software engineering, can be business, can be anything. So every course is going to have an ID, which is going to be a primary key, and this will also be an integer. We can also have, and that will be a simple table for our programs. Then we're also going to have our table for courses. So our table for courses is going to be, so I'm actually going to name this with plural names. Our table for courses is going to be courses, and that table for programs is also going to be programs. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and define the courses that are going to be defined or offered within a program. Now another thing that may be important while having this course is going to be the ID of the program in which this course is being offered. So that's where our one-to-many relationship is going to come in. Each time we shall create a course, we shall have to associate that course to a certain program. And that's what we're going to basically do. So to do that, what we're going to do is to basically create another column. And this column is going to be our program ID. So the program ID is going to be a foreign key, which is basically a key that maps onto a primary key of another table to basically symbolize the relationship between those two tables. So once this is a foreign key, it's also going to reference or to point to the ID of the table program. So we shall just come right here and say that this is going to be our programs, which is the table name dot ID, meaning the key of our ID, just like you see it right here. All right, so we've been able to define our simple table. So let's go ahead and basically define our simple database models. So to define our database models, what we're going to do is to basically create Python classes and define various attributes on them, but those attributes are going to be the things that we see right here. So to create a database model in SQLAlchemy, all you first need is to have a model base class. So what a base class is going to do is to basically get all the attributes that are specific to a database model and map them onto that specific class that you may want to define as your database model. So a base class is one from which all database models in SQLAlchemy inherit. So to create our base class, we are provided by the declarative base class that comes from the SQLAlchemy ORM package. So I have to first of all import that. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and say from SQLAlchemy.orm, we are going to go ahead and import our declarative base class. So once we've been able to import that, then we're going to go right down here and we're going to define our base class, which is simply going to be a subclass of that base class. So I'm going to come right here and say class base, and our class base is going to help us to just get access to the attributes that are defined within our declarative base class. So we shall just come right here and say that our base class is going to inherit from declarative base, and in here we shall basically just pass this and we shall have got all the access that we need to all the properties within our base declarative base class. So now let's go ahead and define our two tables. The first one is going to be our class, and this class is going to be a program class. So when defining your tables in SQLAlchemy using database models, it is always wise that you use singular names. So for example, if our table name is going to be programs, then it will make more sense if we define our database table as program. So in here we're going to first of all inherit from base, and then we are going to pass this for now. So we shall also come and define our class, and this class is going to be our course class, and it will also inherit from our base class, meaning that's going to be our simple database model. Now, one important thing when using SQLAlchemy is the fact that you always have to define database tables or database table names each time you create a database model. So for us to do that, what I'm going to do is to come right down here, and the first thing we shall have to do is to define the magic or the Danda table name, and this is going to be basically pointing to the name of the table. So I've actually done it within our base class, sorry for that. So what I'm going to do is to cut this and then rewrite our pass statement. So what I'll do is to just come right in here and basically provide our table names within our tables. So for table names, you are free to use whatever you want, but it's also wise that you basically use our plural name. So let's say the database name is program, then you can go ahead and feel free to call the table name programs. If our database model is named course, then the best name for that table will be courses. All right, so let's go ahead and define our attributes. The first thing we shall have to do is to create our attributes. So to define our attributes, SQLAlchemy provides for us another class that helps us to define them as classes or mappings using type annotations. So type annotations are one of the ways that Python has tried to basically make sure that each variable is defined with a specific time. However, this does not run at runtime, or this does not even basically influence the type of a specific variable within the program flow. But it may be important when trying to access the different methods that are accessible on a certain type. So let's go ahead and look at how to do this. So I'm going to come right here and say that from SQLAlchemy.orm, we are now going to go ahead and import our mapped class, and then we're going to start with our ID. So I'll say that our ID is going to be equal to a mapped, and then in here what we shall have to do is to specify a type. So in this case we want to basically specify that this is going to be an integer, but you can feel free to use UUIDs or any other identifiers. So once we've been able to do that, then we can go ahead and define other attributes onto a specific column. Now remember, in the old version of SQLAlchemy, we had the column class, and under this column class you would define the type of the column, and you also define other attributes and other constraints that you may need on that specific column. Now in this case, we have the mapped column function, and the call to this mapped column function will allow us to do exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to do is to come right down here and say that we shall have our mapped column, and this in here is going to help us to specify that this is going to be our primary key. So by providing primary key is equal to true, what we're doing is to specify that this program is going to be having its ID column as the primary key. So we're going to do the same thing for our course. So I have to copy this and then I'll paste it right within our course table as well. So let's go ahead and speed code these other attributes. We shall begin with our name, which is a string. So in here we can come and say that the name of the program is going to be a mapped string. And then we shall also define the years of study. So the years of study are also going to be an integer, so that's going to be mapped integer. And then we can go ahead and also use mapped column to basically specify other constraints that you may need. If you don't want this to be null, then you'll say something like mapped column, and then you'll say nullable is going to be false, meaning that you don't want to insert null values within these specific columns. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our years of study. We shall say mapped column, and this is going to be nullable, which will be false. So once we've been able to do that, then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our courses table. I'm going to copy the name, which may be very similar to the code and other fields. Now what I'm going to do is to come right here and basically paste what we have as the name. So what I'll do is to just change this to our code, and once I've been able to do that, then I'll do the same thing for our title. So this is actually going to be the code, but we shall also have the title. So I'll just copy that as well. So I'll just come right here and say title, and then I'll say code. But one other field that we have, which is actually one of the most important fields, is going to be our foreign key. So to define our foreign key, we'll have to first of all specify the type of the foreign key. So we're going to come right here down below the code and say program ID is going to be a mapped. And in this case, we'll have to specify which kind of or type of basically keys this is going to be. So this is going to be our mapped integer, and this will be equal to a mapped column still. And in here, we shall have to define that this is going to be a foreign key to a certain table. So to do that, we're going to access the foreign key class that's present within SQLAlchemy. So what I'll do is to go at the top right here, and all I have to do is to import it from SQLAlchemy from SQLAlchemy. We are going to go ahead and import our foreign key class. So shall have to get access to the foreign key class. And once we've been able to get access to the foreign key class, now we shall just come right in here and say that this is going to be our foreign key. We shall have to first of all point to the column that we want to make our foreign key. So our target column in this case is going to be the ID of the tables of the programs table. So for us to be able to reference that, all we have to do is come here and provide our column as a string, and this string is going to be the name of the table, which is going to be programs, and then the ID column of that specific table, which is going to be ID. Another thing we may want to specify is going to be the delete behavior, just in case we are to delete the parent table, which is our program table. So what we may want is to go ahead and delete our courses that are associated to a certain program when the parent program is deleted. And that is the importance of onDelete equals cascade. So for us to specify that, we are going to go ahead and say that we shall have another specific important attribute. This is going to be onDelete, and here we shall say onDelete is going to be equal to cascade. So every time we shall delete our course, then our program will also be deleted. So once we've been able to do that, then we can go ahead and also basically set up string representations of our tables. So the way we do that in SQLAlchemy is by basically defining dunder repre methods, and these dunder repre methods are simply going to help us to have readable or human readable string representations of our database model objects. Now for now, we're going to start with our program, and in here we're going to say that this is going to be self, and we shall have to access the specific name. So let's actually access the name, and in here shall basically get our object as this object. And I'm going to do the same thing for our course, so I'll just basically copy what we have there and paste it right here, and what shall have is going to be self. Let's just say self dot our title. So once we've been able to do this, the next thing is going to be for us to basically go ahead and create our tables within our simple database right here. So for us to do that, we shall have to first of all access the metadata of the base class, which is basically going to be all the information about these columns that are specified within our database model. And once we've been able to do that, the next thing is going to be for us to basically attach that to our engine and create our database tables. So to do that, we're going to create another file or module, and I'm going to call this our create db.py. And in here is where we're going to go ahead and basically create our simple database. To create our simple database, we're going to begin by first of all importing our engine object. So to do that, we're going to say from connect, we are going to import our engine object. So I'll say import engine, and then we're going to also access our models. So we shall come right here and say from models, we need to import our base class, which is going to be our first class, and then we shall also have to import our program class, and also shall import our course class. So once we've been able to import this, then you're first of all going to find out the metadata that is present within our table. So for us to do that, we shall basically make a simple print statement right here, and what I'm going to do is to basically come and say getting metadata. So I'll just basically go ahead and print this, and what I'll do is to come right here and say print, and in this case shall just come and say print base dot metadata, and in this case if we print this, if I say python create db.py, that will go ahead and basically execute this metadata object right here. So in here we can go ahead and also basically create our data using base.metadata.create all. But the first thing we shall have to do is to first of all go ahead and basically attach this to our engine object. So to do that, we shall just come right here and say base.metadata dot, and in this case we shall call the create all method, and this create all method will be responsible for creating our database. But what we shall have to first do is to basically go ahead and bind this to an engine. So an engine is going to be the database connection in this case, and by us associating this to our database connection, what we are doing is to basically point to a specific database that we need to create. So in this case, that will be our simple SQLite database right here. So if we go ahead and bind this to our engine, shall say bind is going to be equal to engine, and this will be just enough to basically create our database. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. So if I go right here and I clear my terminal. If I run python createdb.py, we're now going to see that our course table and our program table have been created, as well as our foreign key relationship that we have right here. So next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and see how we can add items to two tables that are associated to one another in a one-to-many relationship. Before we associate, or before we actually populate our database, we are first of all going to create a relationship. Now the beauty of using an ORM is the abstraction that comes with all of the logic that is concerned. You will have to just write Python, and that Python will have to deal with whatever logic is going to happen at the database level. Now for our case, what we're going to do is to set up relationships that will help us to be able to just simply access these objects from their associated objects. Now take this for example. So sometimes we may need to access all programs or all courses that are associated to a specific program. So what we do is to go ahead and select all the programs, and then all the courses, and then we filter out which courses have their program ID as the ID of a certain program, which is a bit tedious. But with SQLAlchemy, you can go ahead and configure something like program.courses, and that will basically go ahead and query for us all those without us having to worry about the ID of the parent or whatever SQL statement. Now that may also be the other way around in case you want to access a specific program that's associated to a course. So you may want to do something like course.program, and that will basically return our program that's associated with a specific course. Now let's go ahead and configure that. So to do that, I'm going to go within our models.py, and I'll have to import a very important function. So that function is called the relationship function, and what it does is to describe a reverse relationship from one object to another. Let's look at how we do it. So I'll go at the top right here, and all I have to do is to import one other function from SQLAlchemy.orm. So that's going to be our relationship, and once we've been able to import that function, we're going to come where we have our parent table, and we're going to describe how we're going to access all courses that are associated to a specific program. So to do that, we shall just come right here and say that we want to access all courses. So we shall say that courses, and these are going to be a call to our relationship, but remember that this is going to be a mapped object, just like we defined all these other mapped columns. So we'll have to define a container that's going to represent a query set, or let's say a list of all the items that will be related to that specific program. So we shall come right here and say that this is going to be a mapped. So we are going to define a list or a set or any other iterable that's going to basically represent the container for all objects. For all objects that are going to be specified or related to this specific program. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and import the list type from typing that will help us to describe the list of all these course objects. So I'll go at the top right here, and all I have to do is to say from typing, we are going to go ahead and import our list class. And once we've imported that list class, we shall come right here and say that we are going to have our list, and we shall have to specify that this list is going to be one of course items. So I'll copy this name of this class, and then I'll have to paste it right here, meaning that whenever I access courses on our program object, we shall be able to get a list of courses that are associated to that specific course. Now the beauty about this is, even when you're adding courses to a specific program, instead of having to deal with SQLAlchemy, all you have to do is to use the list type or the list methods to add courses onto our program. So let's go ahead and define some more extra attributes. So the first one we're going to define right here is going to be our back populates or our backref. So let's set our backref. So the backref is going to help us to basically specify how we want to make the reverse relationship between a course and a program. Now, how do you want to access a program from a course? So to do that, what you have to do is to say course.program, and therefore have to basically say that's going to be program. And by doing that, whenever we get a course object, we shall have to say course.program, and that will help us to access the program object that will be basically related to that specific course object. Now let's go ahead and also set up one other relationship, and that's going to be a relationship on our courses, and that will define how we shall access our programs. I don't think we even need that, as long as we have our course, and this is basically defined as our list of courses, and we have our backref right here. I think we are good to go while setting up this relationship. So the next thing is going to be for us to basically populate our database. So for us to do that, what I'm going to do is to come right here and create a new file. So I'm going to call this file our, let's say, populate dot. So I'll just come right here and say populate.py. And this populate.py file is simply going to go ahead and create multiple objects or the following classes, and then we shall be able to store them within our database. So what we first of all need is going to be our session object, which is going to give us the ability to do CRUD functionalities on our simple database. So the session is one way in which SQLAlchemy provides for you an interface through which you communicate with your database and carry out selecting or updating or deleting and so on. So to create our session, all we have to do is to first of all import. So we shall import from the SQLAlchemy ORM. We're going to first of all access the create, or actually it's going to be the session maker class. And then we're using that, we're going to first of all create a base session object, just like we created our base class. And this is going to be our session maker. And once we've been able to create this instance, we're now going to go ahead and define our local session. Now you feel free to call it a local session, but for simplicity, I'm going to call this our DB object. And this is going to be an instance of our session right here. So within our session maker, we have to first of all bind this to our engine, which I forgot to do. So I'll come and first of all import our engine. So I'll say from connect shall import our engine object. And once we've been able to do that, then we shall also come right here and say that our bind is going to be engine. So this is basically one way of showing SQLAlchemy that, you know what, this is the database that we're going to be using. Since the engine object is one that's going to point to the specific database that we shall be using. So once we've been able to do this, now let's go ahead and try to create some model objects. So I'll first of all import our model object. So I'll say from models, we are going to import our program and our course. So shall just come right here and import our course. And once we've been able to do that, then the next thing is going to be class, or actually we shall create program objects. So I'll say program1 is going to be equal to our program, and within here what you have to define are the various keyword arguments. So the first one is going to be, so I'll just come and copy them from here. So we shall have our ID, our name, and our years of study. So I'm just going to come right in here. So I'll delete what we have right here, and I'll also delete what we have right here. Do not need type hint, so I'll also get rid of the colons, and then I'll have to delete this also. So let's say the ID of our first program, let's say this is actually going to be auto-generated by SQLite, so shall not need it that much. And then shall need our name, so let's say this is going to be our bachelor's in, let's say, computer science. So just going to call it bachelor's in CS, and then it's going to have 3 years of study, just like you see right here. So we are also going to have our second program, so I'm just going to copy this and paste it right here. So I'll call this program 2, and then I'll give this let's say bachelor's of business. So once I've been able to do this, the next thing is going to be for me to populate our database using these 2 objects. So creating this in our database is going to be as simple as saying db.session, or actually this is our session already, so we just have to say session.addAll or db.addAll, and then you shall have to specify an iterable or a list of those objects, which are going to be our program 1 as well as our program 2. So once we've been able to do that, then we're going to go ahead and finally save this to our database by saying db.commit. So once we've been able to do that, this will be enough to just go ahead and save them to our simple database. Now I'm going to open up my terminal right here, and all I have to do is to say Python and then populate.db. And this is going to go ahead and insert into our database, just like you see right here, and then it will end by committing this to our database, meaning it will persist it within our database. So let's go ahead and verify this. What I'll do is to go ahead and import, not actually import, but to basically open my DB browser for SQLite to basically see our simple database that we've created and the various things that we've populated in there. So I'll go ahead and open this database by accessing where I kept it. So it's within coding, and then I think it's documents, coding, and then I think one-to-many relationships. So that's the specific database we've created. So I'll open it right here, and now we see our tables are existing, and this is the structure they have. And when you go ahead and also see our programs table, that's the structure it has. If you go ahead and look at our table for courses, this is how it looks like. And if you go and see our programs, we've now inserted some programs right within our database table of programs. So an interesting question can be like, okay, we've been able to add the parent objects. How can we add child objects in a one-to-many relationship? Now that's what we're going to look at. Now that we've been able to add or basically create objects of the parent table, let's go ahead and look at how we can add child objects into our table. Now those child objects are going to be our course objects or our course records. So for us to be able to do that, I'm going to head over to populate.db.py, or what we call populate.py, and I'll have to first of all comment out these statements of committing to our database. So I'm going to comment them out, and I'll add the comment right here. So this is going to be saving, in this case we shall just come and say saving programs. So this will actually be saving programs. And once we've been able to do that, then we're now going to focus on creating course objects. So we're going to create many course objects, and those will be helpful. So to do that, we're going to copy idle or id, and this is going to be our title and our code. So I'll head over to our populate.py, and all I have to do is to come right here and say course 1, and this course 1 is going to be an object of type course. It's going to be our course, and this is going to be having, so in here what we need to access is going to be the title as well as the code of that specific course. We have 4 course objects, just like you see right here. Adding these course objects to our database is going to be simple as using the relationship that we defined in the previous section of this video. So the way we're going to add courses to our database is through the use of this relationship that we set up right here. So if we want to associate these courses to a program, all you have to do is to come right here and say, let's say a course like a program such as program 1 is going to be having courses. So what you shall have to do is to call the relationship, which is courses, and then we specify a dictionary method, and that's going to be our append method, which is basically going to add them onto the list or to the end of the list. And in here, what you shall have to do is to specify the course that you want to add to a program. In this case, let's say I want to add course 1 to our program, which is basically our bachelor's in computer science. So we may do that for our first course, and then let's do that for the second course. So just come and paste this a bunch of times right here. So we now see that that science also belongs to computer science, and also have our third course, which is data structures. It also belongs to computer science. Now we can have our fourth course, which is basically our business communication, that is going to belong to our business. So what I'll do is to copy that, or actually basically add it right here, and also update the program to be our program 2. So once all this is done, to save this to our database using our relationship, what you shall have to do is to go ahead and basically use our session to commit this to our database. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to come right here and say db.commit, and this will be just fine to basically save this into our database or to persist them. So to do this, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and run our code with Python populate.py, and this will go ahead, and so we see that this is basically going to add this. So let's see what's happening. It's going to add them to our database. If we go ahead and try to verify, seems like they are not being added. Now I've realized the mistake I did when trying to add courses by using the one-to-many relationship is the fact that I was using these database objects that are not actually stored in the database. So what happens for this one-to-many relationship to work is we have to use stored objects and then associate them to child objects. So what I'll do is to comment this out, and then what I can do is to go ahead and query for our programs and then associate them to our courses, just like we did right here. So what I'll do is to come right here and say something like program 1 is going to be equal to, so we shall use our db object or our session object to create it here. So to do that, I'll say db dot, in this case we're going to query, so we shall use the query method, and here we shall have to specify the entity that we're querying, which is going to be our program model. And once we've been able to do that, then we can use all sorts of filters. So we can say dot filter by, and in this case we want to find out the program that has the name bachelor's in CS. So if I come right here, I will say that this is going to be our name, which is going to be bachelor's in CS, which is going to be name equals to, and in this case we shall basically paste in our name right there. And right after doing that, this is going to be a query which shall return many items. But if we want to access the first object that has that specific name, then all we have to do is to say dot, and in this case we shall have to say dot first, and that will return for us only one object that will be specific to that specific program. We're going to do the same thing for the second object for our second program, which is going to be program 2. Now program 2 is going to have our name, so I'll just come right here and say program 2, and program 2 will have the name, which is going to be bachelor's in business. Now keep in mind that I've commented this out, so the code that has been used to create this is not going to run. So if I come and change this to bachelor's in business and then save, if we basically notice what we've done here is we've first gone ahead to query for the created programs in the database, and then we've created our course objects right here. So what we've done is to create course objects, and once we've been able to do that, then the next thing is going to be to go ahead and add or basically associate those course objects onto our programs, and then finally commit our session. So to save this in our database, what I'm going to do is to pull up our terminal and then run Python populating.db.py, and now we see that various insert statements will be created. So what we have here is that we shall insert into courses the following attributes about the course, and then we have to specify the values, and this will be done for all our courses. Now if we go ahead and verify within our simple database right here, if I refresh, we'll now see that each of our courses will be created and they will be associated to our programs. Now notice that these IDs, or foreign keys, sorry for this, are going to refer to the programs that are found in the ID right here. So each ID here is going to be a foreign key in our courses table, just like you see right here. So just like you see, program 2, which is our business communication course, is going to be one that's going to be associated to the second program, and all the other courses are going to be associated to our program with the ID of 1. So that simply shows how we can add objects to our database by basically using the one-to-many relationship that is found in between them. Let's see how we can use our one-to-many relationship to access all courses and programs. So to do that, what we shall do is to go right in here. So I'll create another module right here, and I'll basically call this, let me just call it query.py. So the first thing I'll do is to import our session object, just like we did, or the one that we created in our populate.db. So I'll say import populate. So this is actually going to be from populate. We are going to import our session, or what we call the DB object, and then after doing that, then what we have to do is to query for a specific course, just like we did right here. So what I need, or what I can actually do, is to go ahead and modify this so that we don't have to run the code that is found in here. So to do that, what I'll do is to cut our session object and cut all the inputs that are specific to it, and I'll place them in one specific file, which I'm going to, let me actually just place them in here in the connect.py file. So what I do is to just place them in here, or I'll go to populate.py and cut them, and then I'll paste them right here. Then I'll import the session maker. So I'll remove the session maker from here, I'll put it within our main connect.py file, and then all I have to do is to go ahead and access it from, so I'll say from connect, we shall import our engine as well as our DB object, and then we shall be able to use that right here. Then within our query, then I'll also be able to import our DB object, just like we see it right here. Now we shall also access our models. So we shall say something like from models, we are going to import our program model. So we shall say from models import program, and then we shall import our course. Now let's try to see how we can access the different courses that may be associated with one program. So how we're going to do that is, first of all, accessing the course, or actually accessing the program. So to do that, I'm going to copy one of the queries that we have in here, so I can actually just import this as well. So just like we see here, we queried for that specific program with this specific name, and we're able to get that specific program. We also queried for another program that had this name. So we can also do the same thing by saying from populate, we can import our program 1. We can also get access to our program 2. And once we've been able to do that, if we want to access all courses that are specific to the program 1, we can just say print, and in this case, we shall say that we shall just come and say program 1 dot courses, and this will be just enough for us to print all the courses that will be present within the program 1. So if I save and run this, if I say Python, let's say query.py, shall now see that this is going to return a list of all courses that actually, these are actually courses, not programs, Now I'm going to fix that by coming right here and changing from program to course within our specific string representation. So if I come right here and say Python query.py, we shall now say that this is going to return all courses that are going to be specific to our first program. Now if we try to access, now I realize there's some code that has been run once again, and basically we are now retrieving all the programs that were added. So when we query or when we access the programs 1 and program 2, we actually go ahead and run this file. Now what I'll do is to just simply go ahead and comment this out so that we don't have to add them to our database again. So this is going to be one for adding child objects to the parent. And once I'm able to do that, when we go back to our query.py and print our courses, we now see that Alice is going to be returned, but this time we shall not have other courses inserted. So this is basically going to return all courses that are specific to program 1. But if we try to print all courses that are specific to program 2, in this case if we say program 2, and this will be program 2 dot courses, in this case we shall notice that this will basically go ahead and only return business communication, and that is the only course that's going to be specific to our program 2 course. So now I can make a conclusion that you guys have understood how we can access objects from a parent class in a one-to-many relationship.